We're about 4 or 5 minutes over time, so I just want to try and draw together now the speakers so that we can start to answer some of the questions that have been raised in the chat. So if I could ask the speakers to turn their cameras on. Quite a flurry of comments and questions in the chat earlier this morning. If you are able to respond to those that are specific to your projects, please do. I see Hugh's been very busy responding already. And lots of the questions are obviously bigger, broader than potentially some of the projects are, currently focusing on or currently being able to deal with. Some of these are sort of more national questions. But what I'd like to just dig into, I think one of the questions that was raised, the importance of leadership within your councils and the role the council had in these projects. I think that would be my first question, just to get your views on that, how important that was or how useful, helpful that was. So can I start with Kate?
Sure. So if I think about the RESO project, we actually had 2 local government organisations in our consortium. So we had the West Midlands Combined Authority and we also had Coventry City Council, who were absolutely driving this forward and were a real linchpin in terms of the focus for the activity. So yes, I think it was hugely important to have that level of ambition and also recognition of the importance of the agenda. It is sometimes very hard. Energy is a very complex subject. It's been a bit kind of a black box. The decisions are made well away from kind of feels like public eyes and public scrutiny. So it's hard to kind of see where you can affect change sometimes. So to have that kind of visionary piece that says actually we should be at the heart of this decision making process was really important, and it definitely particularly helped in terms of kind of local ownership as well, because we were able to kind of use a number of sort of redirect a number of kind of stakeholder forums that were already in place to talk about local issues, to try and widen out some of the understanding around some of the energy system stuff. So it was crucial.
Thank you. And Tina, I think ESO had a sort of slightly different approach in terms of their involvement, the council at Oxford.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we were Pivot Power the main lead, but we were the lead with them as such. So
Sure.
It was really important to have. Well, I think one of the things you start to do on a project like this is to make sure who's the key critical decision makers in the council, at what level do those decisions need to be made, and you make sure they form part of your board, your internal board, governance board. That's essential. And then people change and move jobs, and so it's as Kate said, it's quite a technically challenging area. So giving the people you're dealing with confidence and enough knowledge, but not so it's so difficult and complicated they can't understand it, is also critical. And we had to do it on stuff. We had to do it quite a few times in different locations. Buying fleet,
Sure.
we had to pay for half the fleet value. I mean, there's quite a lot of work to be done, I think. But once you have those on board, it has helped us significantly. So.
Thank you. I was just about to bring Phil in, but I think we've just lost him. Has he got you? Is he still there?
I'm going to have a go. Sorry, Gordon.
I know you've got to go. So just your view very quickly from a partner perspective. How important was that, and how
I think it's really interesting. And in Kate's earlier presentation, you pointed out, there's no statutory responsibility for local authorities to deal with energy. And if you think of that in terms of Scope 1 emissions, it's probably a fraction or a few percent for a local authority in terms of direct emissions, but their influence is huge. And that's what really came across from a partner's point of view. And I think, as Elliot's presentation showed, the impact of the PIFA project in accelerating a whole programme of initiatives and giving investor and local authority confidence has been really key.
I know you've got to rush off, so thank you, Phil. Thanks for that input.
Apologies.
And somebody's just prompted me for my next question, which I was about to raise, which is really good. So, over to you, Elliot. In terms of a smaller local authority without the PIFA funding, where would you be, or how has this helped in terms of getting you into the position you're in now?
Well, as I say, I think it has been a real catalyst for us. That's the real word for it, I think, because without it, I don't think we would have been able to achieve half the things that we've been able to do. I think coming back to the other question in some ways, I mean, we were leading the PIRI project, but we don't have the skills and capacities in house. I mean, I'm a lawyer by trade, so I'm not an energy specialist, and it's a steep learning curve for me. And there are a number of other colleagues that some of the challenges was actually explaining what a heat network was at the start, because it's not at that time it wasn't necessarily known. So having that sort of catalyst to be able to say, okay, there's an opportunity that we can develop a really interesting project, which then allows you to bring in private sector and academic institutions like Phil to actually sort of bring those minds together to look at it and develop how that would work, has been, you know, phenomenal really for us. And as I said at the end of the presentation, it's led on to so many other opportunities throughout the PIFA programme and beyond. So it's been really helpful.
So I think there's two things there. One is what's the real shape, the right shape for a council energy team? You know, what's the skills, what's the structure, and how do they work then with commercial organisations, and how does that scale in terms of different sizes of organisations? There's an interesting sort of insight there, and learnings from how you guys have learned from what you're doing, and passing that on to other councils so that they can get on the runway. So I've left you to the last, Jodie. So there's some big questions raised in the chat, you know, finance, grid connections, community group working with councils, skills, supply chain. You know, some of this stuff I think we're touching on in your event in a couple of weeks. So is the GFI work being shared?
Yeah, great. Yeah, we're doing a lot of work on finance. A lot of the themes that have been picked up on already this morning will be covered at that event. So I do encourage you, I dropped the link into the chat to book online for that session. You know, this can look really overwhelming, but it all starts with people. And what you've heard this morning is people in organisations taking action that builds momentum and catalyses further action. And so there are some comments in the chat about, oh, well, how do I afford it, and how should I pay for the systems, and should I plan first and then deliver later? And it's much more messy than that. I said that at the beginning. It's much more messy than that. And the key thing is that people are at the centre, and if you decide to do something about it, there are things you can do. And there's a whole host of information and resources on Net Zero Go. You've got this morning's sessions to inspire you. Yes, they had a lot of funding, but ultimately it starts, like Tina said, you know, they had one person employed. Lots of local authorities don't have anyone employed, so they team up with community energy organisations who are, you know, who have been doing this a really long time and do have a lot of knowledge and skill in this area. So there are ways you can leverage in skill and support and capacity. A lot of talk about how you leverage that in from the private sector as well. So there's loads you can do, but it starts with you taking action. Sure.
Thank you for that. And that's a real useful plug for the event in a couple of weeks, because I think there's going to be some really useful sharing there. On the skills bit, obviously we're going to talk about net zero living later, and the non-technical barriers, etc. So hopefully that will be useful as well. And from a Net Zero Go perspective, you know, we're coming at this from projects, and we're obviously very aware that councils are doing projects, so we're trying to help them with those. But eventually, we'd like to form that into some sort of understanding around a local plan, etc. But if they can get projects off the ground and generate some revenue or save some costs, then they can start to establish teams and start to build from there. So, you know, there are ways of doing this, as you say. So I've got to stop there on the Q&A. Apologies for that. We got squeezed a little bit, so apologies for that. But thank you very much to all our speakers today. Jodie's going to come back on towards the end, but thanks very much for joining us. You're very welcome to stay with us as we move into the next section, and please do respond to questions that are relevant. Thank you very much. Have the slides back up, please.